Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. This is your captain speaking, and I would like to take this opportunity to personally welcome you to this Christmas special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. We know you have a choice when it comes to your radio listening pleasure, and would like to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. What's more, we are confident that no other radio program or venue will fly you over the friendly airwaves in as much comfort and style, nor leave you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment quite like we can here at the Wright Flyer. Now that you're aboard, please be seated, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. We've taxied to the departure lane and are awaiting takeoff clearance from air traffic control. While they go through that mindless, bureaucratic red tape and regimentation, my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I shall delve into the pre-flight checklist because there is a lot of news and information to get to before we may indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, here it is. Christmas has long been a recognized holiday in the United States. The day itself has strong links to the historical roots and foundations of this country. Remember, in 1776, General Washington led his men across the ice-choked Delaware River to attack a Hessian mercenary base, and these mercenaries were stationed just outside the town of Trenton, New Jersey. This was a much-needed victory as the tide of war had turned against the patriot cause. The Christmas battle ensured victory in the cause and prompted George Washington to claim that the holiday has extra meaning for the United States, as our liberty was secured that evening. But if you actually look at the way things are going in this modern country and the way that the regime and the atheist acolytes of death and destruction have been marching against the traditional symbols of the Christmas holiday, it's absolutely stunning. It seems that they've gained steam and that they are redoubling their efforts to deprive the sense of joy and the spirit of giving that has always been a part of this season. It's almost as though they want us to be as miserable as they are. What do you think, Jeremy?
Well, in certain individuals, I think that would be fine, fine, fine. Certain individuals, like professors, I don't know, Terry Fine from University of Central Florida, who says that we should replace Merry Christmas. She wishes that people would stop saying Merry Christmas, instead wish each and every individual happy federal holiday. Really?
Well, and you know what's interesting about that? It's almost as though what she's trying to do is to say that all joy is supposed to come from the state. You know, that reminds me a little bit of the Nazi mentality of Adolf Hitler. Remember what the Volkswagen Beetle's first name was? It was called the car that was strength through joy. And they even named the town where these cars were built Strength Through Joy, because they were basically saying strength and joy were created by the state. That is the type of twisted mentality that we are facing with these radical and extremist left-wingers.
And, you know, again, I don't understand why people can't say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah. The mentality of the individual has been broken down all due to political correctness. And I believe that's going to be the brunt of the show tonight, dealing with political correctness surrounding the happy holidays. I was out doing some Christmas shopping earlier today, and I make it a point and this may seem a little off topic, but it blends right in. I make it a point whenever I see an individual wearing military veteran apparel, I make it a point to walk right up to them, ask them if I can shake their hand. They gladly extend, and then I tell them thank you. Today, I did it with 5 individuals, and when I was done, I wished them all a Merry Christmas. They said Merry Christmas back, probably because they're not politically correct, because they understand why they put the uniform on for me to have the security of the First Amendment to wish people a Merry Christmas.
Well, yeah, it makes sense because, they were the ones that were willing to take the risk to ensure that we had the right to free speech, the right to the freedom of religion, which we'll get into a little bit, and also the right to free exercise of religion. It's almost as though these atheists don't realize that a part of the entire First Amendment is the free exercise clause. They want to ignore that, and they just harp on this notion of separation of church and state. But what they present is a truly bastardized version of it. It's not the real thing. The only purpose of the freedom of religion that's contained in the First Amendment is to ensure that Congress does not create any laws that establishes an official church of the state. But if you look at the way that they've gone on to this zero tolerance policy with celebrating Christmas or having any religious celebration or iconography in public spaces, it's almost as though they are trying to establish an official religion, the religion of atheism. They want our government to be an atheist government. And is that not a religion? I'm fairly certain it falls into the confines and traditional definitions of religion.
Sure. And the Supreme Court even upheld that atheism is considered to be a religion. So, to me, again, I'm not an atheist. And if somebody is an atheist, well, okay, it's your constitutional right to believe that. That's fine. I'll have an issue with that. The issues I have with regarding religion and political correctness is individuals think it's okay for them to insert or assert their religion onto me. And it's like they have that holier than thou attitude, so to speak. My religion is better than yours, or, well, let's take this so-called religion of Islam, to where they said, we talked about numerous times, convert or die. That would be no different than atheists saying, if you don't become an atheist and stop saying Merry Christmas, I know, let's say Happy Solstice. If you don't say that to people, then, we're just going to kill you, because if we can't convert you to atheism, we'll just kill you.
Right.
It's traveling down the same road, and it doesn't matter which religion it is. If any religious belief held that and imposed that on anybody else, they would be no different than each other.
Exactly. And, it's this cancerous doctrine of political correctness that has turned against Christmas and most of our other religious holidays, too. You see these nefarious and radical left-wing ideologues which have targeted Christmas celebrations as a supposed impermissible entanglement of church and state. But as we were just saying here, the First Amendment was not intended to be used in a way as to separate all religious symbols from public places. And as we had just said, it was rather designed to ensure that federal government didn't create legislation proclaiming an official religion of the state. However, these radicals who are doing their utmost to remove any and all symbols of Christmas or religion from government buildings, irrespective of context, are attempting to make atheism the official religion. And as you said, Jeremy, they are absolutely encroaching upon the fundamental and unalienable rights of their fellow citizens. And as we have oftentimes repeated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, your rights end where another's begins. So that in and of itself is a violation of the Free Exercise Clause, which is also found in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. And here in the state of Texas, we have a perfect example of this. The city of Orange, Texas, is facing pressure over a nativity scene which is on prominent display in front of City Hall. Now, Governor Greg Abbott has come out and said that he supports its display, but radical atheists are threatening to bring suit against the little town of Orange over a nativity scene. I mean, of all the things to bring a lawsuit over, a nativity scene, how is that harmful to anyone? It's absolutely mind-boggling to see how these people are either traumatized by it, made afraid by it, or offended by it. But last I checked, there is no freedom from offense in the United States Constitution. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll have to look again in Article 9, section existent.
Sure. And another example, and I think this happened, about a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago. I can't remember the town or the state where it happened, but our listeners more than likely have heard of this. But there was a town to where the nativity scene was actually removed from the town square by the town council, the city council. What the residents did reassures me that there are people in this country that will not allow political correctness to dominate their lives.
I think this was in North Carolina.
That sounds familiar. But what the residents did was the town nativity scene was taken down, so the residents each, and there was numerous residents, over 100, maybe even over 1,000, all put up their own nativity scene on their own private property. And to me, that's kind of, like saying, okay, well, you're going to take this one away. Well, we'll come back tenfold just to prove the point that you're not going to dominate us with political correctness.
You know what it reminds me of, Jeremy? It kind of reminds me of the response that we saw from a lot of private citizens right when they were going after the Southern Cross battle flag back this summer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think 2015 is actually going to go down as one of these years where political correctness was finally shown for the devious, cancerous, and poisonous doctrine that it absolutely actually is. Because in this year, we have seen the lopsided, one-way street approach of tolerance. How can you be claiming to be an acolyte of tolerance when you're actually preaching intolerance? That's the type of duplicitous dichotomy that we see with these social justice warriors, for lack of a better term. And I think that actually is a pretty apt description of them, because what they are doing is they're actually declaring war on our traditional institutions, our traditional way of life. I mean, going back to that Obergefell decision, we see that the traditional institution of marriage has had its meaning completely stripped by a court that is making decisions that makes no sense whatsoever. And we see that too is subverting the will of the people who voted on this, like, what was it, Proposition 8 in California that was overturned by a judge?
3 times, by a homosexual judge at that.
Shouldn't that judge have recused himself or itself?
Absolutely. In fact, it should not have even gone to that level because, again, it was voted on by the people 3 times. Now, political correctness, this is an exact example of where political correctness has been violative of constitutional rights. Citizens of the state of California voted to not have same-sex marriage 3 times, and the courts overturned it due to political correctness.
Right, and then the Obergefell decision that we saw this summer was just the basic capstone of all of this political correct nonsense that is infringing upon people's First Amendment rights. And of course, people will sit there and say, with respect to Christmas, why are we making such a big deal out of it? But we're not the ones that are making a big deal out of it. It is the atheists that have been teaming up with organizations such as the ACLU. And I'll get into that a little bit, but I want to talk about mainly what's been happening at schools. Schools have been banning the singing of Christmas carols, including seemingly secular ones like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, because it includes the lyrics, "One Foggy Christmas Eve." One school has cut scenes from A Charlie Brown Christmas, which depicts the Bible. It's as though they want to control what people think. This is offensive, but the acolytes of tolerance only care about their radical left-wing agenda, and they obviously don't care about whose feelings they hurt. And, that's what's laughable about it. Because when you actually stop and look at it, these people are just as radical and inflexible as the Islamofascists who have sworn to destroy our culture and civilization. It is beyond belief what these people are willing to do, and just how far they are willing to go in an attempt to strip us and deprive us of this joyous time.
And the thing is, they want to replace, again, the Christmas holiday has been a staple in the United States since we've won our independence. It's been celebrated time and time again, even the true history behind Christmas. And it's not just, the exchanging of gifts, being with family, this and that. People have even gotten away from the true meaning of Christmas, which is the birth of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, schools want to take that out. This is a direct assault on Christianity, is what it is. Because they
Yeah.
look at it, and Christmas, again, Christ is in Christmas. It's a direct assault on that. They want to destroy Christianity. Political correctness, that is one of the first major goals that political correctness wants to take care of. If there was an individual that created political correctness and they wrote a manifesto regarding political correctness, it would mirror the Communist Manifesto and Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party platform.
And Mein Kampf too.
And
And of
exactly.
course it outlines that or mirrors that, because political correctness is, as an ideology, is basically molded off of that. Where you start to really see it in prominence is in Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, and that has been used to devastating effect by this current regime and by the radical extremist left wing. And, it's interesting that this version of the left that we see in our country today, they refer to themselves as the new left, and I have a solo flight edition that addresses exactly who they are. And don't fool yourself in thinking that this was a Democrat Party invention, because it was not. It's mired in the progressive movement, and as we all know, the father of that was Republican President Theodore Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And here's the other thing. You have the creation of other holidays. And
Kwanzaa.
exactly where I'm going. Dr. Maulana Karinga, according to History.com, is a professor and chairman of Black Studies at the California State University, Long Beach, created Kwanzaa in 1966. After the Watts riot in Los Angeles, Dr. Karenga searched for ways to bring African Americans together as a community. This is quoting from History.com.
Mm-hmm.
He founded founded US, a cultural organization that started to research African first fruit celebrations. Now, here's the thing. Doesn't Christmas already bring people together as a community? Hence the
Absolutely.
nativity scenes being on display in the community square, people gathering at town shopping centers,
Yeah.
doing their holiday festive shopping, so on and so forth. I, why would we even need this? Now, of course, individuals are going to, hear the show and say, oh, now they're attacking Kwanzaa. They're racist. Absolutely not. Absolutely not, because it is impossible for people of the Christian faith to be racist. Here's why. Because Christ, as his background, his disciples were of Arabic descent, Mediterranean descent, Jewish descent, so on and so forth. It was all inclusive. So we as Americans, by birth, how can we be racist if we celebrate the birth of our Savior, who is not American, wasn't deemed or perceived to be Caucasian completely, so to speak? How I don't get that. It just doesn't make sense. But
Yeah, he was a Semitic Jewish carpenter.
uh, correct. And again, because we make mention of a holiday that was created for the sole purpose of bringing people together, we already have that. And to me, it seems that maybe that holiday is racist. They want to have this projection of us being racist. They're the ones that scream the loudest, but yet they're the ones that are the racists themselves because this holiday specifically mentions in that article to bring the black community together, bring African Americans together as a community. Isn't that
It's segregation.
segregation?
Yeah, it's
Correct.
absolutely segregation. And, even if you don't adhere to the Christian faith, if you are an American, there is a deep rooted reason as to why you should celebrate Christmas. Remember the Battle of Trenton, New Jersey.
Hmm.
That was the gift of liberty. If we had not secured a victory in that battle, it was very likely that George Washington would have been replaced by Congress with a much less capable General Gates, and that would have just left us exposed. And I think that the Brits really could have won the war at that point. And in fact, Washington said that the Battle of Trenton was the turning point of the entire Revolutionary War, and it was fought on Christmas Day.
Sure. And we would all be drinking tea and eating crumpets, and on Christmas Day we'd be putting oranges in each other's shoes.
That and avoiding the dentist. It goes to show that there is more to the history of the United States and to the history of this holiday than meets the eye. Now, I know I have a friend who is really um, interesting in his faith. He's kind of this messianic type faith, and he doesn't celebrate Christmas, and he sits there, he says that it has pagan roots, and I'm not going to deny that the date December 25th is actually for the Roman sun god Sol Invictus, but it doesn't matter what day we celebrate. I I say that the most important thing is that we realize that there's salvation and that liberty was really secured on Christmas Day. That, again, has roots both in the history of this country and in the faith. It doesn't matter what day it's celebrated on. It's just an acknowledgement of it. And I know he'll still disagree with me, and that's fine. I just have had this discussion with him before. And it's like I've said before, I really do think the Battle of Trenton has a place that should be celebrated as a holiday in this country.
Well, and again, those that adhere to the doctrine of political correctness, first of all, they would be scratching their heads and say, Battle of Trenton, never heard of it because it's not taught in schools. And it's not taught in schools because of those individuals that have formulated this disease called political correctness. It's deliberately left out of education because of the very astute point that you made. It has secured our liberty. They
Yeah.
don't want us and our children and our posterity to understand why and how our independent attitudes have come about, our sovereign citizenship, what we truly have as individuals in this country. They don't want us to know that because if we know it, it gives us the ammunition to fire back at them and put them in their place.
Exactly. And you know, what it comes down to as well is when you stop and think about it, we aren't saying that you have to celebrate Christmas. I'm not going to tell anybody that they have to celebrate Christmas, but you notice they say that we simply cannot celebrate it because it's offensive. But I find it offensive that they are trying to strip away our traditional symbols, our traditional holidays, our traditional character and heritage. And we've seen that from the Southern Cross battle flag to the displays of Confederate memorials down in New Orleans, Louisiana. There's a major battle going on right now where Mayor Mitch Landrieu had them labeled as a public nuisance. Now, it's interesting because there's a federal court battle going on because many of these are national landmarks.
Hmm. And I find that offensive
Oh, it
with
absolutely
individuals
is.
like Landry. But see, here's the thing: because I find it offensive, I'm not going to tell them, you know, you can't do that. I'm not going to make a big stink about it, like someone who just got done watching, March of the Nerf Herders.
Burn
It's
me, Sanders.
right. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to voice my opinion, utilize my Second or First Amendment right, which will maybe have to be reassured by the Second Amendment right, that,
Mhm.
you know, I don't agree with this, and here's why. I'm not going to say, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you have to do this, you have to do this. I'm not going to tell anybody they have to do anything because it's not my place to tell anybody you have to do this. This is what these political correctness monsters don't understand. That is the exact same tactics that they use when they say, you have to do this. We want you to do this. We want, we want, we want. Well, nobody on this planet is big enough to tell me what I have to do. I am an individual. I am a sovereign citizen of the United States. Nobody's big enough to even make me do what they want me to do.
Absolutely. And you know, it comes down to this other thing too. It's just look at how selfish it is. It's I want, we, me, we, us want,
Yes.
and it's never about the entire community. And you know, we are big about individualism, but we also understand the need for this time when communities come together. It's as the old Bing Crosby Christmas song. I love that Christmas feeling states. It states, strangers I meet all seem like friends. Well, that's exactly what the spirit is supposed to be about. That's what this season is all about. It's about coming together. It's about being open and honest with each other because especially in this modern society where we see the type of duplicitous politicians that we have, like the Senator Bernie Sanders, like Hillary Clinton, coming out and lying about Donald Trump, saying that ISIS has been using films to recruit off of him, using video of him to help recruit. Well, it turns out there's no evidence of this. It's another video lie. And that seems to be yet another pattern with the Clinton camp. Remember, it was a video that caused Benghazi?
Benghazi.
Yeah,
Sure.
and now there's another made up video. Maybe Hillary should stop watching these made up videos and get back to the real thing. But, you know, we need a time when we can relate to each other as Americans and as decent people. And that's what the Christmas holiday was always about. But it's almost as though nothing is sacred anymore. And you just look at the way that the society treats everything today, and it becomes readily apparent that nothing is sacred anymore.
Sure. And this is why earlier in the show I made mention of my adventures out to do my Christmas shopping today and shaking hands with those veterans and wishing them a Merry Christmas. Total strangers, two total strangers. And what I actually got something out of it, as I always do.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of the veterans actually had a tear in their eye when I shook their hand and told them thank you and wished them a Merry Christmas. And
Yeah,
those two individuals, they stopped what they were doing to share a story or two with me about when they were in country or what they were doing at that point in time and why they were doing what they were doing. So that's that's the fellowship that takes place amongst common strangers. It's an awe-inspiring thing, and it's one of the things that you know, not even just this time of the year, but every time I go out in public and I see a veteran, I take time and shake their hand and thank them
Oh,
because
absolutely.
because I understand why they did what they did,
Well,
and I understand why political correctness has destroyed that camaraderie of American citizens, American patriots having a conversation just at the spur of the moment, a spontaneous conversation between two strangers. They don't like that. They're trying to destroy it. And these same individuals that have adopted this, oh, I'm offended by the military. I don't care if you're offended by the military. You don't have the right to not be offended.
right.
You don't like what the military does, so you're going to disparage those who put on the uniform and op- opted to offer up their self to protect the very right that you're utilizing to disparage them.
Yeah, they put their life on the line to ensure that the United States remained a solvent and safe and cohesive country. And, that is absolutely what we see these political correct acolytes of so-called tolerance that are really the soldiers for intolerance do. They are using a tactic of or strategy of divide and conquer. All of this hyphenated Americanism, all of these different groups, they are purposefully weaving in a strain of balkanization here in the United States in an attempt to make us weaker, and in so doing they divide us. That makes us more easily manipulated, and that's how they can go in with these phony wars that they speak of, the war on women, to roll back quote unquote progress. But if you actually look at the so-called progress that they've done, it's not true progress. It's destructive. It's actually going out after the Constitution, creating a complete and total antithesis of what it means to be a free, open, and honest society. And that is a major danger that we are facing in the United States of America today. And it is just a prevalent problem that's not going away. And, with respect to this Christmas stuff, it's, as you said, there are some towns that have moved displays such as nativity scenes to desolate locations to avoid the wrath of the army of atheist radicals who are hell-bent on ruining the enjoyment of others. These atheists are nothing short of tyrants. And what the small town in North Carolina shows is that they are bullies. But the people, the way that they responded, saying, no, we will no longer bow and capitulate to your twisted machinations and your twisted desire to deny us our unity and cohesiveness as citizens of the United States. We're just not going to tolerate it anymore. And I don't blame them.
Absolutely. Well, let me be the first to say that when you made mention of declaring wars, I'm declaring war on political correctness.
Absolutely.
Now I know other individuals have said this, but you know what? I'm actually going to stick to my guns on this. I'm going to follow through because that's the type of individual I am. I do what I say I'm going to do. And
Right.
I know you're right there alongside me, Randy, as well as our friend and First Air Marshal Nelson and various other individuals that listen to these programs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Folks. I'm going to tell you right now. When we had our war in Iraq or Afghanistan with Operation Shock and Awe, you haven't seen Shock and Awe yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it comes to another thing. Political correctness, that doctrine absolutely has blood on its hands. Remember the neighbor of Tashfeen Malik and her stupid husband, Saeed Farouk?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
She was afraid to report them because of the effects that would happen or occur if she had been labeled an Islamophobe.
Mm-hmm.
This question was brought up during the Saturday Democrat Nazi committee debate, and Bernie Sanders just swept this aside. The nerd face was just, oh, well, it's actually, you should report it if anybody has guns, and guns are bad, and I'm Bernie Sanders. He didn't actually address the fact that she was more afraid of the heavy hand of government and the destructive power of the federal government than a terrorist bloodbath.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Hillary Clinton makes mention, well, guns aren't what's going to, keep Americans safe.
Oh, does
Really?
she buy into Jessica Jen's thing that
Uh,
sex toys are?
I again, this is all the political correctness crap going on because, again, it's removing historical fact and replacing it with some unicornian dream
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
it's, oh well, the guns aren't going to keep us safe, but at
Right.
this point, what does it matter? Well, it absolutely matters.
Well, of course it does.
All firearms matter.
Absolutely. And, it comes down to they try and make these ludicrous claims of, once again, they double down on this whole thing of, well, we're not actually against the Second Amendment. We just don't think you should have ready access to military style arms. Well, if you go back to the American Revolution, you've got to remember that the Minutemen carried rifles that were superior to what the British regular carried, those
Mm-hmm.
Brown Bess smoothbore muskets. And then they sit there and they try and say that the founding fathers could never have imagined the type of modern firearms we have today. But that's limiting them because, as you recall, Benjamin Franklin had developed a scheme where they would put up hot air balloons, move them behind enemy lines, and lower them, having troops in them. That's a paratrooper,
Yes,
basically
it is.
modern airborne.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And speaking to the modernity of the firearms at the time, you mentioned our Minutemen actually had better weapons, better rifles than the British. They were more accurate. They were more lethal. They had a longer range to them. Now, if our founding fathers couldn't envision, having advanced weapons technology, why is it that the world's largest military superpower was insufficient with their weaponry when it came up against the Minutemen?
Yeah. And it was because the Minutemen were armed with the latest technology.
Correct.
And if people forget that the British did try and ban the colonists from having those rifles.
Mm-hmm.
They passed legislation attempting to strip that from the American colonists, and that's a bunch of nonsense. But of course, that is the type of historical revisionism that we have seen run rampant in our institutions of education throughout this country. They're doing everything they can to rewrite the history to make it seem as though their radical left-wing extremist agenda is what happened in fact. But it did not. It absolutely didn't happen the way they said it is. And, they try and rewrite our founding fathers as these racist, bigoted, sexist people that had no good, genuine, original ideas because they don't want to admit that our entire system is based off of the timeless principles of natural law.
Sure. And again, what it is part of this revisionism because of political correctness, following that doctrine. We've seen it all throughout history. They want to give this facade of what their version of equality is. They rewrite history to show that both sides were, well, we have to make it equal for both sides. And that way, we can eliminate the whole thing of, this country beat this country. And they've went so far as much as to take it all the way down through the educational system and eliminate things like dodgeball. You can't play dodgeball in school because there's some students that are, much more athletic than other students, and it's just not fair. Well, you know what? Life isn't fair. Life is what is dealt to individuals. Each individual is different. Again, individualism. Not everybody is an athlete. Not everybody is capable of taking a giant red rubber ball and hurling it at somebody and coming so close to borderline breaking their nose with it in gym class. If that was the case, if everybody was made equal that way, well, we probably wouldn't exist because we would have just eliminated ourselves 100 years ago, thousands of years ago, as a planet, as a species on this planet. We're not designed to be made physically equal. This is, again, another example of them trying to do this whole transgender movement. Let's look at what's its face. The one that was on a box of Wheaties cereal back in the
Oh
70s.
yes, bruised
Bruised
gender.
gender. That's and now if he was on a cereal box or she or it or whatever, it'd be Fruit Loops. I
Just follow your nose. No thanks.
Right. Well, and again, that is a prime example of them trying to, encapsulate the American people's minds with their projected sense of what equality is. It's crap.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And it goes against everything that's natural and traditional. It really is an attack on anything that is natural, anything that follows the natural order of things. And you can see this, the way that they're against the natural law, the way that they're against our traditional institutions such as marriage, the way that they just try and redefine everything. To tie this back into kind of the veterans that you were talking about, after the VA has been through its litany of scandals this year and last year, another story has come out where it has been ordered that Christmas trees are banned from public display at VA facilities. You have got to be kidding me. But no, this is just par for the course with respect to this Obama regime. They are just doubling down on every visceral attack that they have against the good and decent things of the United States of America. And chief among them is our freedom of religion. We've seen it with Obamacare, where they have told certain Catholic hospitals and various other religious-oriented hospitals and stores that they had to, provide aborticide birth control or funding for abortions. That kind of heavy-handed thing that they're doing is just absolutely against the freedom of religion and the free exercise of religion. And that was one of the few areas where the Supreme Court got something right. And I believe that was back in the summer of 2014 that the Hobby Lobby case was handed down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, nothing ceases to amaze me anymore. To me, I'm of the mindset that when we hear stuff like banning Christmas trees at VA hospitals and VA centers, I'm not surprised by that in the least bit. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we had some organization like, I don't know, Code Pink or the LGBT come out and say, well, we don't want people to take their Christmas tree decorations or holiday tree decorations, and in those decorations, we're offended by someone placing an angel on the top of the tree because that symbolizes rape.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if someone came up and said that. Now, I'm going to say this. If they do come up with that, guess what? I'm going to sue them for infringement of intellectual property because that's my idea.
Right.
Okay? I coined it. It's mine. But
they really shouldn't be offended by an angel on top of the tree. All you have to do is call it a fairy. Oh, wait, is that insensitive?
And my thing is, what they don't understand is that it cannot be perceived as rape. Only they would think of something like that and utilize it in a denigrating way. Again, why? Because it would be another attempt of them to attack Christianity through political correctness.
Oh, absolutely.
Now we can't leave anybody out regarding this because we have to be inclusive or else we wouldn't be proper, the Scientologists would follow suit because they would say, well, we don't want stars on top of the Christmas tree because, well, we find that offensive because stars are their own being and placing them up on the Christmas tree would fall right along the same lines as the reason of an angel being placed up there, according to Code Pink and LGBT and,
Right.
Jessica Jen and
Yeah.
whoever else.
LGBT STFU. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's when you see the ACLU joining up with a school group in Oregon and trying to ban choirs from singing and trying to prevent the display of nativity scenes, you're seeing an abuse of the legal system. You are seeing acts of institutionalized terrorism. And let's make no bones about it, folks. These people are terrorists. They're just like ISIS. They're out to destroy. They're out to deprive. They're out to denounce. They are out to do everything: deprive, destroy, and demean. Our 3Ds that we see all the time with the radical and extreme fringes of the left that have absolutely taken over the Democrat Party. And, they not only want to steal our money, they want to steal our pride, they want to steal our identity, and they want to force us into this politically correct box, and it has no place in a free society like that of the United States of America. It just absolutely has no place in our society.
Well, with regard to the ACLU or the acolytes of communist liars united, uh, every single one of those so-called lawyers
Mhm.
should forfeit their law licenses right now. Every single one of them.
Yeah,
Because
they're in violation of their oath of office, as far as I'm
exactly,
concerned.
exactly. That is exactly where I'm going. Because they all took the exact same oath that you took, Randy.
Mhm.
And they are to uphold, protect, and defend the United States Constitution. Period.
Mhm.
What they are doing is using the Constitution as cannon fodder to destroy the Constitution. Well, wait a second. Isn't that what the whole auspice of the ACLU was at its inception, according to Roger Nash Baldwin and Crystal Eastman? I
Yes.
believe it was.
Yes. And it goes back to the Scopes monkey trial. You know that
Mm-hmm.
nobody was actually enforcing that law, that was just a dog and pony show, that entire case between Williams Jennings Bryan and
Mm-hmm.
Clarence Darrow about the teaching of evolution.
Yeah.
Nobody was following the old Tennessee law. Nobody.
Right. And again, I'm not surprised.
No. It's always theater with the left. It's never about the truth. It's never about rationality. It's always raw emotionalism with them, because when people are hyped up into this hypersensitive emotional state, they are much easier to manipulate. And that's exactly what these radical extremist left-wingers want to do. They want to manipulate us so that it's easier to deprive us. And again, I'm reminded once more of Barack Hussein Obama coming out on the 2008 campaign trail and saying that it was his goal to fundamentally transform the country.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we need to be fundamentally transformed? We don't. The only fundamental transformation that needs to occur in this country is the transformation of the way government thinks and the way that government acts. We have a true governmental philosophy that is diametrically opposed to not only the natural law tenets that underpin our shared United States Constitution, but the very Constitution itself. And they are doing whatever they can to further divorce every auspice of government from the proper scope, limitations, and applications of government as laid out, defined, and even mandated by our Constitution. And again, this is why it is so important to have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared Constitution, because when you have that knowledge, you are empowered to see where the threats of danger are and how to adequately, reasonably, and proactively rebut it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we can go on for hours and hours on political correctness. I mean, we can even talk about, vegans and vegetarians and their whole thing of, well, people that go out and hunt and kill animals, that's animal cruelty. But yet, according to the Word of God, humans are the dominant species on the planet. We are the masters of those beasts. They're here for a specific reason. Now, to all of these vegans out there that think of a person like me as being a hunter and, engaging in animal cruelty, I'm just going to say this. I'm doing nothing more than protecting your food supply. You're welcome.
Right, right. And it's the same type of mindset that you get with these radical atheists. Why is it that everything they do is always about deprive, deprive, deprive?
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed that they never come out to give, to create, to construct? It's always destruction with these people. And I think that it's a horrible way of life. They must absolutely be miserable to be perpetually offended, to be perpetually afraid of symbols. It's as though they are afraid of any type of thing. What's next? Are they going to ban fairy tales too because those are offensive? I wouldn't put it past them since they've attempted to ban the Southern Cross battle flag. It's all lunacy. It is lunacy of the worst sort. It's ludicrous lunacy, and it has no place in our society. Yet they are just going to keep doubling down on this until they get as far as they can in tearing this country apart at the seams.
Speaking of giving, I would be willing to bet dollars to donuts that if any of these individuals, atheists, LGBT, any of them, that find it offensive that the Salvation Army bell ringers are standing out in front of a store collecting donations for the less fortunate, if any of them were to drop some change or money into that kettle, I'm willing to bet that they would probably spontaneously explode. I mean, it would be an awesome sight to see, nonetheless.
Yeah.
But you know, the idea behind that is they're incapable. They're the ones who are preaching again intolerance. You have to be more tolerant. You have to be more forgiving. You have to do this, but yet intolerance or tolerance and forgiveness are staple attachments to what's known as charity.
And who are among the least charitable people in the entire country and indeed in the entire world? It's these radical extremist left-wingers that just want to steal it out of everybody's pocket. People that are successful realize that charity is a necessary part of success. It's part of what is required of us from the natural order of things.
Sure.
But it cannot be forced by the hands of government because that just leads to corruption and abuse. And when you have corruption and abuse of the system, it loses all its meaning, focus, and purpose. And we've got to get past that. But the only way that we're going to do that is to radically and fundamentally transform the thought process that occurs at the governmental level. The bureaucracies are just out to grow themselves. And again, they are just by their very nature very self-centered, very self-focused, very selfish organizations. And they are tyrannical and inflexible. And we're just seeing this doubled down under the Obama administration. New bureaucracy after new bureaucracy created. And, the Democrats are not the only ones that are guilty of this offense. Look at the Department of Homeland Security. That was created by George W. Bush. And has that not been an unmitigated disaster? The TSA are, the butt of every one of our jokes. They are ineffectual in their duty. And they don't even know what their duty is, it would seem.
No, and, when you talk about these things that are created that become abusive and abused with regard to charity. Welfare. Everybody wants to talk about welfare reform this and welfare reform that. Well, here's an idea. Let's just get rid of it altogether. Why reform it? It's being abused. It was, again, set up by individuals under the FDR administration and then further advanced under the Johnson administration, LBJ, that, we have to help these families that are struggling. They used the guise of charity to create an established welfare state. This is what they do. This is their whole agenda. They use the Constitution to destroy the Constitution. They use charity to create welfare, abused welfare, so on and so forth.
Yeah, because they are thinking that they're going to create this permanent power base from it. And if you
Sure.
stop and think about it, they also use that twisted game of semantics that we've mentioned going back all the way to our first episode back on September 11th of 2015. And look at it. With Johnson, it was the Great Society. Is there anything great about this welfare state that he has created? Have we accomplished anything in this so-called war on poverty? Again, it's that abuse and twisting of the traditional definitions of the word to deprive it of all value and meaning. And when you do that, you really start to tear apart the societal fabric of the country at the seams. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. They are diametrically opposed to everything that made the United States of America great in the past and propelled it to such lofty heights. And of course, if we are ever going to spark a renaissance here in the United States, the likes of which this nation and indeed the world has never seen before, we have got to go back to embracing strict adherence to the United States Constitution and the natural law principles that underpin it. And of course, that is much easier said than done, because you're going to see that these nefarious political elites that have done everything to distance and separate themselves from the decent, hardworking American citizens, the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this country, are going to label us as radicals. They say that wanting to preserve the Constitution and to restore the country to what is great about it is somehow radical. Now wanting to enforce the laws, whether it's border security, whether it's, our fundamental and unalienable rights, what have you, that is now considered a radical and dangerous ideology. In fact, we even had Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, come out and say that constitutionalists are a potential homegrown terrorist threat to this country, and they said that we posed a greater threat than Islamo-fascists. And yet, I haven't seen constitutionalists running out and killing people. I've certainly seen the Farouk run out and do that, but I haven't seen somebody like Nelson, somebody like you, somebody like me, somebody like a vast majority of our cherished listening passengers and audience here do something like that. Again, it's this type of Orwellian nightmare that they have constructed behind the scenes, and they are just trying to cram this down our throats and destroy us.
Sure. And, I'm reminded of some things that I've seen online. Pictures, selfies, which that's a topic for another discussion, the selfie movement in and of itself. But individuals taking pictures of themselves, holding up a sign that says something to the effect of, I have a master's of arts degree in women's studies, but the only job I can get is as a bartender, and I'm forced, emphasis on forced, to rely on welfare and WIC to provide for my children.
What a bunch of malarkey.
Now, here's the thing. Number one, first of all, it's your fault that you decided to waste your time getting a so-called Master's of Arts degree in women's studies. You were fed the Kool-Aid by dump truck loads. You opened your gaping maw and you let it slide down your throat and into your belly, and it warmed the cockles of your soul to think that, oh, this is going to be a useful degree. Number one, that's your first problem. Number two, nobody is forcing you to do anything because of your lack of ambition to better yourself, to have the skills and develop the skills to be able to provide for you and your children. Number three, at that point, you probably shouldn't have even had children because you lacked the fortitude to even take care of that awesome responsibility.
But, a lot of them have children because it allows them to get more welfare. And, again, it shows that they are completely abusing the system. And,
Exactly.
let's add on to this. You know how Bernie Sanders has been coming out there saying that we need to have free college education for all the college kids in the United States? We already have a problem of what they call degree inflation here in the United States. We have basically made a degree meaningless and worthless. And so if you're going to make it free, you're going to make more people have it, and you're going to deflate the value of any college degree or postgraduate degree that much further. And
Sure.
people just don't seem to understand this. They don't understand the way of the real world. They're caught up in this utopian la land where everything is about sunshine and lollipops, but that's not how the world works, and it's just going to lead to to more disillusionment, more alienation, more consternation, more angst, more anger, and more anguish.
Sure. And you know, Randy, unless people stand up to this political correctness, revisionist history crap, and this facade of intolerance,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to see college degrees come by the way of people utilizing food stamps to go out and buy a box of cereal, and on the back of the box they'll be able to fill in their name with the Quran, and that would suffice as having credibility or a degree.
Well,
It's
it already has more credibility than a lot of the degrees out there. For instance,
absolutely
that Master of Arts in Women's Study. I can one up that. How about we have a Master's of Arts in the women's movement and feminist movement of underground basket weaving?
sure. And and again, I may be prophetic here, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody listens to this episode and listens to this segment of it and says, well, you talk about this fake war on women, but you guys are attacking women with the women's studies degrees, blah, blah, blah. It's because those particular degrees are made up. How many people actually have jobs, legitimate careers devoted to women's studies? Gee, the last one that I could think of was when Margaret Sanger was around, and she completely utilized the whole I am woman, hear me roar movement to indoctrinate people and create an organization that is responsible for more deaths than all of the Holocausts and mass genocides combined over the past 200 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And she was a racist to boot. But
Absolutely, yes.
they don't mention that either. But, what it comes down to is a degree or bachelor's in arts used to have meaning. You could get a job with history. The study of history is very beneficial, especially if you're interested in law or if you're interested in economics or any kind of banking trend or business in the country. If you have a good grasp on history, you're able to then devise what might happen. You are able to predict what might happen in the future, and that is a very useful tool or asset to have. But it's been changed. One of the things that they've done with history, they've changed it away or taken it away from being a narrative type of study and have tried to create what they call a social science. What the hell is a social science? A behavioral science? That's not science. That's bovine excrement.
Sure. It's like my degree, Bachelor of Science of Criminal Justice. Now, criminal justice is a science.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely is. It entails forensics. It entails legal studies, understanding the Constitution, knowing that the Constitution is the sole premise of the criminal justice field.
Mm-hmm.
It's a legitimate degree. I have an Associates of Business Management, or Associate of Business. That's a viable degree as well. But Masters of Arts in Women's Studies, my brain hurts just trying to think of any kind of field where that can be applicable as a legitimate career.
The only one is if you were going to go on and get an even more meaningless PhD, doubling down in that, and then trying to at a college, but that's just propagating more of this propaganda. That's just more indoctrination,
Sure.
and it's all meaningless and worthless. It's not serving the students, and that's part of the problem. A liberal arts degree used to be about creating a well-rounded individual, but it has now gone so far away from that they don't teach how to be well-rounded. They don't teach you critical thinking. They teach you mushy indoctrination that just makes you a little tyrant. And we've seen that with these million student marches that have just been erupting like the Black Plague in our institutions of higher education across this country.
Now, you mean like Jessica Jin?
Of course.
You know, and again, not to sound prophetic, but people are going to attack us on this.
Of course.
Fine. That's fine. For those of you out there who are going to attack what we say on here regarding this segment and what things we talk about, just make sure you're willing to accept the reciprocal consequences. And, I welcome it with open arms. Because, see, this is what true freedom of speech is. This is, you're offended by it. I don't care. Good. And to quote Andrew Breitbart, that you need to understand that you don't have the right to not be offended. I have every right to offend people because I'm willing to accept the consequences of what I say under the First Amendment. All these people, again, want to say, well, I have the right to freedom of speech. But, you can't say that to me because you're retorting what I say against what I say, and I'm offended by you, challenging what I say.
And, it brings up the question of when did people in the United States of America become such sissies? It reminds me of what happened on Columbia, where they wanted to ban these Halloween costumes because they found it offensive or whatnot. Get over yourselves. The world does not revolve around you. You are not a microcosm of everything that exists in this world. You're just a bunch of busybody potentates that want to force your will on us. And we've had it. We have absolutely had it. I am sick and tired of hearing how you're offended and your little heart is pitter-patter, broken and torn on the floor, and therefore you have to deprive somebody of their fundamental and unalienable rights. Enough is enough. Grow up.
And for individuals who are kind of straddling the fence on this, hop off the fence and reattach your, set there. Yes, because, you're not helping the cause for, true independence and freedom. You're absolutely not. Well, I could see that, one person could take offense. I could see how that could be offensive. I would take offense to that. I don't care. I don't care. The more people that I offend, the happier I am. I have a simple philosophy. Every morning, every day when I am awake, the first thing that crosses my mind is how many people am I going to offend today? And I'm not a happy camper if I don't offend at least one individual. I'm not. I'm not easy to get along with. I'm ornery. I'm cranky until I offend somebody. That's just me, because that tells me when I offend somebody that I'm doing something right. And that thing that I'm doing right is righteously exercising my constitutional, unalienable rights. Period.
And, the way that these people are tyrannical with their politically correct doctrine is it's shocking. It goes to show that this type of cultural Marxism has taken on a whole new shape, form, and ideology. I think it's more divisive than it's ever been. It's certainly more insipid than it has ever been. And what they're trying to do is destroy what exists. That is something you always see with respect to the radical and extreme fringes of the left, is look at Mao Zedong in China and the Cultural Revolution. They had to destroy all those beautiful monuments that existed before they were there. Look at the way that the communists have always attempted to blot out the long-standing history that has been there. Look at the way that the Islamo-fascists with groups like ISIS go around and destroy those beautiful ancient monuments, many of which were over 1,000 years old. And then look at the way that our traditional monuments and institutions are under attack here. You know, they want to destroy the nativity scenes. They want to destroy any and all Confederate monuments because they say, and incorrectly, completely erroneously say, that the Confederacy was the equivalent to an American Nazi movement. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Nazis were socialists. They were the National Socialist German Workers' Party. And the Holocaust was the worst, most cruel, redistributive program ever devised by the hands of man, except for maybe the redistributive programs that were put on large-scale 5-year plans and pogroms in the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin. But they don't make the connection there. They try and say, look, because the Confederates had slaves, which, by the way, slavery was with us in the Bible. Slavery still exists in the Islamic world today, but they want to say that they were Nazis. But I thought that the Confederates were completely against any notion of a centralized government. And that was part of the reason why they lost the war, is that they couldn't get centralized enough to make critical decisions at an important juncture. And that was part of the reason why we replaced the Articles of Confederation with our shared United States Constitution.
Well, speaking of slavery, slavery exists here in the United States. It's just a new form of slavery.
Bondage to the government.
Bondage to the government. Democratic voters.
Yeah.
Slavery. I mean, you know, these are the individuals that are preaching all this intolerance, but yet they willfully give their whole existence to supporting the very entity that is creating all of this.
Yeah, you know, it goes down the line of they're against big business, they're against big pharmaceutical, they're against big oil, they're against all these big things. Why in the hell are they not against big government? That still, to this day, baffles me, because it shows that there is a duplicitous nature behind the radical and extreme fringes of the left, these utopian socialists who are hell-bent on destroying everything that we hold near and dear about this country, particularly our fundamental and unalienable rights and our shared Constitution. And they are savage in the way that they attack all of this, and they are you know, zealots in their cause.
Sure, and it's, you know, sadly, it's not just Democratic voters either. It's Republican voters too.
Yeah, the detente wing of the gutless opposition party.
Right. I mean, look at what just transpired. You know, this whole thing with, you know, what's his name, the bearded lady, Speaker of the House. I mean, you know,
yes.
he just
Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan, or is that Paul Ryan?
Bearded lady, Ardendick. You know, it's whatever his name is. He just, again, people supported him, and now he's doing the exact same things that he railed against. But as long as he got the initial votes of support, hey, he's fine with it. Now he can reveal his true colors.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just.
Uh-oh. And you know, Jeremy, you're absolutely right. This is part of the problem that we're facing in this country. These people are just so diametrically opposed to everything that has just been traditionally accepted. And it goes back into that whole thing with these cultural revisionists. They just can't stand what came before and what will come after, or what was good. And, you know, they refuse to admit that they are part of the problem. Absolutely part of it.
Yeah, and you know, again, it's they want to create these problems. They want to create this stuff that's going on, and they want to say, well, you know, you're not being tolerant. You're intolerant. But they're the ones that are going along to get along.
Well, they're the masters of intolerance. You know, I love how they march under the banner of supposed tolerance, but they are the most intolerant people that you're going to see throughout this country. Mm-hmm. They are hell-bent on destroying tolerance.
You know, and it's just, you know, again, it's not just the Democratic Party and those that vote for them. It's the detente wing of the Republican Party.
Yeah, the gutless opposition party.
Sure. And, people had better embrace the idea of individualism.
Oh, yeah.
If they fail to do so, and again, like I said before, I can't make anybody do anything. I don't want to make anybody do anything. I just want to throw the idea out there and show people what the consequences are should they not go down that road. Now, are there going to be consequences with embracing individualism? Absolutely. We've mentioned some of those consequences here tonight and on previous episodes. Like you said, the Department of Homeland Security has declared constitutionalists like ourselves to be domestic terrorists, potential domestic terrorists. Is that a consequence of embracing individualism and the tenets of and core principles of natural law? Absolutely it is. And that's fine with me. Again, I'm willing to accept the consequences for my action in exercising my constitutional rights.
Right. But it's when they start to infringe upon our fundamental and unalienable rights that it becomes a problem, because then it is an impermissible government takeover. Then it is the government becoming tyrannical, oppressive, despotic, and these potentates goose-stepping over the Constitution in order to achieve their utopian socialist agenda, which has no place in a free and open society like that of the United States.
Right. But their idea of that's exactly what it is, but they sugarcoat it and they try to turn it around on us as saying, well, you're just being intolerant.
Yeah. It's basically these weasel words. They have these code words that they attempt to unleash upon us in an attempt to silence us. And, you see this time and again whenever these radical extremist left-wingers go on debate shows. They either shout over their opponent or they sit there and use these labels that makes people turn off their intellectual capacities. It's amazing to see how they've created code words. Nazi, right-wing extremist, and now they're trying to even turn constitutionalist into that.
Well, I mean, and again, I wouldn't be surprised if someone was to say, well, constitutionalists are communists because, the first two letters of the Constitution is CO, and those are the first two letters of communism.
It's also the first two letters of cookie. So does that mean that Cookie Monster's going to attack us too? I mean, come on.
That was intolerant.
Of course it is. You're a blue shaggy piece of monkey stuff. Go away. But it shows how ludicrous their mindset is. And you have to laugh at people like Howard Stern. I don't begrudge the man for having a lot of money, but for him to then go out, and this was 2 years ago or something, and call Rush Limbaugh a whore just because he has money or he sells things, he completely neglected to mention the fact that Rush donates all of that stuff to charity. I mean, get real.
Again, the lack of understanding of what charity is.
Yep.
And not only that, but see, Howard Stern, in my mind, is really no different than Michael Moore or Michael the Hut, as I call him. He rails again, capitalism this, capitalism that, yet they're loaded with money. How did they get that money? By creating a product and convincing people to buy it.
Yeah, they created a demand for it. And, it's like how he comes out and says people who do podcasts are losers. Really? Come on.
You know what?
This day and age? Really?
Let's extend an open invitation to Howard Stern to come onto the Wright Flyer and have a conversation with us regarding who's a loser or not. Well, I'm a winner. I'm worth
$500 million.
Whoa. Yeah. Oh, I'm a winner. No, you're not. You're really nothing more than a feminine hygiene application product is what you are.
An anal rectifier.
Well, rectal aperture.
Yes.
Is to quote my dad. So, I mean, it's,
He got confused about the book depository in Dallas. Thought it was the book suppository, I bet.
Sure. Yeah. Well, knowledge is power, and I'm going to get mine through rectal osmosis.
Oh, gosh. It goes to show that, he gets a lot of his money and a lot of his listenership through just blatant gossip, kind of like what we're doing right here. And it's just to point out that, look, we here at the Wright Flyer claim to be a state-of-the-art radio program. We don't just claim to be, we absolutely know we are. And the reason we know we are is that we talk about things that matter. We talk about empowering you. Does a Howard Stern empower his listeners? No.
Well, let's look at it this way. Howard Stern is, jumping on this bandwagon of, and siding with individuals that preach this intolerance movement and this political correctness movement. He made his money being politically incorrect.
Of course. And he made his money being offensive.
Sure.
But aren't we supposed to be going after any and everything that's offensive in this country anymore? It's like there's a disconnect here, and there's a double standard, and we see it time and again throughout this community and throughout society, and it's time for it to come to a swift end. I'm tired of being told what I can or can't say and what I can or can't do, and I bet our cherished listening passengers and audience are really getting tired of being told what they can or cannot say and what they can or cannot do.
Well, isn't one of the doctrines of political correctness in the educational system is, speak your mind, do this and do that. Well, I'll tell you what, let's start using their tactics against them. Yeah, speak your mind. Don't be afraid to speak your mind. Don't be afraid to offend people.
Right.
If you're afraid to exercise your rights, what you are doing is utilizing and embracing that fear to exercise your rights because you want to feel safe. Guess what? You're going to lose your rights. You're willing to trade them for that sense of security, all due to fear.
But, the ones that are the true acolytes of this movement don't care about security. They care about power. That's what it really ultimately always boils down to with these people. They just want more power, and all of the power they amass is always at the expense of the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this country, we the people.
And this may seem like going off on a tangent, but remember that computer game? It's still installed on all computers, Minesweeper, where you have to click, point and click to reveal where all these mines are. And if you click on one, the whole board explodes. Each individual mine in that could actually be looked at as a fringe wing of this whole movement.
Oh, yeah.
In organizations. You have the ACLU, you have CARE, LGBT, you have Code
Howard
Pink,
Stern.
You have Hillary and her Technicolor unicorn coat.
The Rainbow Farting Jet, Rainbow Farting Fighter Jet Coalition movement.
Sure, and Bernie Sanders with his army of, resurrected, exploded penguins. I mean, it's, the whole thing. And it seems that if you really look at this, they are all individually vying with each other to control things, to obtain absolute power. Yeah. And they don't care what they destroy in the process of getting that. They don't care of the traditions and institutions that they are just leaving ramshackle and absolutely obliterated in their path. And that makes them destructive. That makes them hardly different than the ISIS terrorists that run around destroying all those old ancient and beautiful monuments that are millennia old. Yeah. And why isn't anybody saying anything about that? With those monuments. Those monuments are historical facets.
Because then it would expose the type of duplicity and dichotomy that we are seeing with respect to the Confederate monuments. And, I've actually had online debates with people about this where they sit there and they say that you can't draw the comparison between them and ISIS. Well, I sure as hell can, because they're out destroying historical artifacts.
Well,
And what I love is that they also try and come out and say, well, most of these monuments were put up well after the Civil War. Well, yes, of course they were. Did the South have money directly after the Civil War? Or if I recall correctly, weren't their economies completely devastated by the total warfare that was carried out against them by people like General Phil Sheridan and General Ulysses, or not Ulysses S. Grant so much, but Sherman?
Mm-hmm.
William Tecumseh Sherman?
Sure. Well, and here's the thing. Let's look at the word monument. Monuments are erected after the fact. Mm-hmm. They're erected to show homage to events or individuals of historical nature.
And another part about it that shows the duplicity of what they were talking about when they were out there, they said that they had to remove it to a museum with that Confederate flag in South Carolina. It was already up in a memorial site, a memorial dedicated to Confederate war dead. And it had been moved off the top of the dome of the State House to that memorial site. And then they even erected an African American memorial on the other side of the State House grounds as part of the compromise. Well, that compromise has been obliterated. They've taken away the flag. They've dug up the base of the flag's pole, that area where the flagpole sat, mm-hmm. But they've left the slave monument, so to say, unmolested.
Sure. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, but aren't museums in so much as dedicated memorial sites to begin with?
Yeah.
So why take one memorial site and put it into another memorial site? It's kind of idiotic redundancy.
Of course it is. It's just, again, what they're trying to do is push it out of common parlance, out of common view. And, what they're saying now is the display case for it in the State House little relics room is going to cost over $5 million. And now they're saying, no, that's too much. We should just get rid of it. You see, that's actually what they intended to do from the beginning. They just intended to strip it down so that then they could ultimately get rid of it.
Sure. Well, and that's the thing. They created this so-called compromise to appease people, knowing full well that it's not going to come to fruition to begin with. Kind of like Ron Paul's voting record when he, voted for earmarks in legislation, but he said he voted against the bills, but he knew they were going to pass anyways. So he kind of did that to save face for himself.
With his base.
And his base to bolster themselves up, to make them look like they're some kind of constitutional heroes. Mm-hmm. But really, they're nothing more than a bunch of pugilant little frauds.
Yeah, they're sycophants. They're sycophants with their own agenda, and they don't care what they tear down in the process. And, it's going along the lines of the destruction of memorials. Think about the thing that Mayor Mitch Landrieu was saying with respect to these statues. He said that he would remove them and have them placed in storage until they could find an appropriate place to put them. No, what they do is they put them in storage so that they could conveniently get lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like so many other things. And, it's become apparent that the idea of individualism and resolute sovereignty of the individual citizen of the United States has also been put in storage as to become lost.
Yeah. It's purposeful obfuscation to destroy. And that's everything that this movement's all about. And that's, if Howard Stern wanted to actually do something useful for his listeners or to the people, why don't you go out and address this war on the freedom of expression that we're seeing in our schools, that we're seeing on Christmas, that we're seeing on all of the traditional institutions of this country? Why don't you go out and use your power, clout, and influence to actually make a difference, to actually make something worth a damn?
Well, he won't do that because it will completely undermine everything that he's done now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it shows. It's this fraudulent persona that he's created for himself, and it's not doing anybody a lick of good. Absolutely not doing anybody a lick of good. He's just wasted space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and again, I extend an open invitation to Howard Stern. Get in touch with us.
You know he's not going to accept that.
Of course not. Why? Because he's afraid.
Yeah.
I'm going to push this. I'm going to push for Howard Stern to come on the Wright Flyer so we can have a conversation. I'm worth $500 million. No, because you don't understand what the true definition of value is.
Yeah.
He says he's worth, claims over $500 million, but, to me, if those dollars were equivalent to, I don't know, those annoying little seeds that you find in grapes, it's, I could see an equivalency there.
Yeah.
But I would love not only Howard Stern, but anybody else.
Sure.
Along those lines. Sure. All you have to do, listen to our show. You want to accept the invitation, send us an email.
Yeah.
Post your email information. Get a hold of us. We're not hard to find. Absolutely not hard to find in the least bit.
You can find us on Facebook.
Sure.
That'd be the easiest way.
Easiest way. The Wright Flyer Radio Aviation Excellence Facebook page. There you go.
We do monitor it.
Yes, we do. Often.
But, it goes to show that there really is a problem that is plaguing this country. There is this type of mentality that inflicts, large swaths of the population, and it's troubling. This idea of wanting to deprive the freedom of expression. We see it with the war on Christmas. We see it with the war on everything. And these people, they just are negative Nancy's. Everything is about take away, destroy, deprive, and denigrate.
Yeah, and, again, they're the ones that are perpetuating this in order to destroy things. It's like I've said before, and it's like you've said, and several other individuals we know have said, political correctness is a cancer. And all
it's a plague.
Sure, and even with a plague or cancer, whatever disease or ailment you want to attach it to, there's symptoms. Okay? And this intolerance, offensive speech, if it's like Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General Loretta Lynch, had to backpedal, and
that was amazing, wasn't it?
Oh man, again, I'm not surprised because she realized real quick what she said about going after individuals that have hate speech against Muslims.
It could easily be flipped against her.
Absolutely. So she had to backpedal, recalculate, or go back and sharpen her crayons to rewrite it so it sounds more appeasing and appealing to individuals, so she doesn't have, feverish melted wax on her face.
Sure.
And people say, well, be careful what you say. She's, the Attorney General, and, over the Department of Justice.
She still has to follow the Constitution.
Exactly. And you know what? I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care because I am willing to accept responsibility for what I say. I would call her out. I would call anybody else out. If you're going to violate the Constitution, I'm going to call you out. If you're going to perpetuate this nonsensical bovine excrement that you're trying to, if you have equality, intolerance, shut up. I don't want to hear it. Just shut up. Don't speak until spoken to by individuals that actually give a damn about this Constitution and the United States.
Absolutely.
If your whole premise is to destroy that, then guess what? We're going to find out what happens when you have, how does that go, Randy?
An immovable object meets an unshakable force, or
something to that effect.
Yeah.
I'm not going to back down. I will stand firm, steadfast, on my principles and beliefs, and I will enforce them. And I will defend them at every breath I draw into my body.
Absolutely. And, it comes down to this notion that every one of us needs to know, and that is with our fundamental and unalienable rights is always a couch to duty and responsibility. That duty and responsibility is to proactively maintain and safeguard our fundamental and unalienable rights. And that's why it is so duplicitous whenever these political powers that be try to come out and deprive us of our fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms, when that is the most well-utilized fundamental and unalienable right to defend all of our other rights. And this is why we say this, folks. It's so that you have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby your fundamental and unalienable rights. And we will continue to do this as long as there is breath in our lungs. Now, with that said, it is time to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of eggnog. We will be landing it soon. Let's go ahead and offend some people, Jeremy, and wish everybody a Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, folks.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy Hanukkah to our Jewish friends. And as far as Islamics go Farouk yourselves.
Happy Pork Day for them. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I'm your Captain Randy Wright, and this is my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. We invite you to leave comments in either on either our Facebook page, our Google Plus page, or our YouTube page, and we invite you to join us the next time we head over the friendly airwaves, leaving you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment as we always do. Thank you for flying the Wright Flyer, folks. We will see you next time.